Hi, my name's Arlena. At the family dinner last spring, my parents raised their glasses and announced the inheritance. My sister, Valora, got a private island resort with a yacht dock and beachfront villa. And me? I got the basement laundry room where the staff sleep at night. They smiled like that was fair. Like I should thank them. But what they didn't know, what they never saw coming, was that I didn't get angry, I got quiet. And while they toasted each other, I started buying the island, piece by piece. Why did I do it? Well, wouldn't you? I arrived at precisely 7:18 p.m., the soles of my black stilettos tapping softly against the marble floors of our Palm Beach family estate. The dining hall had been transformed for the occasion. Glowing chandeliers shimmered above us like floating constellations, casting a warm golden hue over the polished wood surfaces, silver cutlery, and crystal glassware. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. I wore a simple black sheath dress, understated, sleek. I knew the night wasn't really for me, but I refused to arrive looking like an afterthought, even if I often felt like one. The scent of ocean breeze slipped in from the terrace doors, mingling with the fragrance of gardenias and expensive cologne. The room was filled with familiar faces, extended relatives I hadn't seen in years, board members from Wellington Harper Enterprises, and a handful of close family associates who always seemed to hover in the shadows of our affairs. At the head of the long mahogany table sat my mother, Marjorie. Her posture was regal, her pearls catching the chandelier's light with every subtle tilt of her chin. My father, Harlan, stood behind her, one hand lightly resting on her shoulder as if anchoring both of them in place. To their left, Valora, my older sister, was already seated, radiant in a deep crimson gown that hugged her figure and seemed to command attention. Her fiancé, Darian, sat beside her, whispering something that made her throw her head back in laughter. Her presence dominated the room with effortless charm. I was always the shadow to her flame. I took the only remaining seat, not at the far end, but far enough to know where I stood. My napkin was folded like a swan. The detail felt mocking. We'd been told it was a celebratory dinner, though no one had been given specifics. A family announcement, they said. My instincts screamed otherwise. I knew my parents well, especially the way they dressed control as tradition. Dad cleared his throat and the chatter fell away. He raised his glass, then set it down without drinking. His voice cut through the air, low and composed. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, surveying the room like a general before a campaign. "This evening marks a significant chapter in our family's story. Marjorie and I have reached a decision about the legacy of Wellington Harper and how we shall pass it on." I gripped my wine glass. My hands were trembling, just slightly, so I held it with both to steady the nerves. My throat tightened. Mother took over, her voice smoother but just as sharp. "Valora has long demonstrated exceptional grace, business intelligence, and unwavering loyalty to the family brand. Therefore, we are proud to entrust her with the stewardship of the family's private island, including full resort rights, yacht dock, and development license." A pause, then the room erupted. Polite applause, approving nods, glasses raised. Valora beamed, lips curved like she had just claimed a crown. I watched her bask in the moment, soaking in admiration like sunlight. Her victory was always inevitable. Then came the shift. The tone dropped. My father turned his eyes on me. "And Arlena," he said, "in light of your philanthropic inclinations and your desire for a more modest lifestyle, we've decided to assign you the laundry room beneath the staff quarters." The words hit harder than a slap. Silence rolled through the hall like thunder without sound. Even the servers seemed to freeze mid-step. The only noise I could register was the faint trickle of the garden fountain outside, a mocking, melodic drip. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. Surely he hadn't just relegated me to the basement? Valora leaned over slightly and whispered, "It'll suit you better, dear. Less pressure, less expectation." Her voice was coated in honey, but the sting was sharp. A few of her friends chuckled behind manicured hands. I forced myself to smile, to play the part I had mastered for years, the agreeable daughter, the peacemaker, the quiet one. I raised my glass, though my fingers ached with tension. "Thank you," I said, voice clipped and barely audible. At that very moment, a drop of wine splashed onto my dress. I looked down and saw a small red stain bloom into the black fabric, like blood blooming through silk. A symbol, perhaps, of the wound just inflicted. Inside, my thoughts spiraled. I'd spent years working behind the scenes, handling logistics, smoothing over scandals, organizing charity fundraisers with the family name plastered on every banner. But I was invisible. Useful, but replaceable. I remembered something my grandmother once told me, back when I was a child, too shy to speak in rooms like this. She brushed my hair and whispered, "Your roots run deeper than they see. One day your name will bloom, and they'll have no choice but to notice." That memory pulsed through me like a heartbeat I'd nearly forgotten. Across the table, Valora raised her glass again. "To new beginnings," she toasted, smiling sweetly. "May our legacy shine brighter than ever." The guests echoed the sentiment. Cameras flashed. The moment was sealed in the annals of Valora's triumph. I didn't toast back. I lowered my eyes, my clutch purse buzzing softly in my lap. I glanced down at my phone, hidden beneath the tablecloth. A message blinked on the screen. "It's time you saw the truth, eh?" No name, no context, just those words. And for the first time that evening, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet, but the unmistakable stir of a storm rising. The Florida night wrapped around me like a damp shroud, thick, warm, and suffocating. I walked slowly down the stone path from the estate, my heels sinking slightly into the soft lawn still wet from the sprinklers. Beyond the iron gates, the ocean whispered faintly, like it was keeping secrets with the stars. I stared at my phone again. The message still glowed on the screen. "It's time you saw the truth, eh?" No name, no number, just that. But I knew it wasn't spam. There was something about the phrasing, the quiet confidence, the way it cut through everything else, that pierced straight through the lingering haze of my humiliation from dinner. My sister's laugh echoed faintly behind me from the dining room. I didn't need to look back. I knew she was standing tall, her glass raised in yet another self-congratulatory toast, probably about the island, about her deserved reward, the same island my grandmother had adored. I typed a shaky reply. "Who is this?" The answer came before I could even take a full breath. "Maeve, meet me at Seaside Cafe. 20 minutes. Come alone." Maeve. The name hit me like a forgotten melody. She had been our family's accountant for years, calm, composed, almost invisible, until she suddenly disappeared when I was still in college. The story at home had been vague. "Disloyalty," my father had muttered. "She crossed a line." I didn't ask more back then. You didn't question things in our house, you just accepted them. But tonight, something cracked. Something inside me refused to be quiet anymore. I walked to my car parked near the fountain, where moments earlier I had stood frozen in shame while my parents announced the inheritance split, my sister Valora getting the private resort island and yacht dock, while I was given the laundry room in the basement, a sentimental space, they called it, where Arlena grew up doing chores. Like it was an honor. The valet was gone. I drove out alone. The cafe sat on the edge of the marina, dimly lit and quiet this late in the evening. A few boats rocked gently in the water. I parked and entered. The scent of strong coffee and salt air mingled in the air, grounding me. Maeve was there, already seated by the window. Her hair had gone silver in streaks, and she looked older, but still carried herself with that same unshaken calm. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said gently. "Neither was I." I sat across from her. "Why now?" She stirred her coffee, hands steady. "Because tonight proved they've buried the truth completely. I couldn't stay silent anymore." "What truth?" I asked, barely keeping my voice even. "Your grandmother's estate. It was never meant to be divided like this. The will was altered. You were supposed to be co-owner of the island. Valora wasn't the sole heir." I blinked. "Are you serious?" "I saw the original documents," Maeve said. "I filed them." And before I was dismissed, I backed them up. Everything, Digital logs, timestamps, the original signatures. Your father's assistant used a proxy account to overwrite the files a week after the funeral. My heart pounded. Why didn't you come forward earlier? You were still with them, she said quietly. Still part of their world. And I was scared. I lost everything, my job, pension, reputation. But when I saw Valora on the news tonight, boasting about the island, I realized they erased you completely. I couldn't be part of that silence. She reached into her bag and placed a small silver USB drive on the table. It was scuffed and ordinary looking, but it carried the weight of betrayal. This has the original files, she said. They can't be traced back to me, but once you open them, there's no going back. I stared at it. And if I don't? She looked out the window, voice low. Then you'll keep smiling through dinners, pretending a basement room is enough. Letting them tell your story for you. I slipped the USB into my purse. Thank you. Be careful, Arlena, Maeve warned. They don't see you as a threat. That's your biggest weapon. Use it. We said little after that. The waitress refilled our coffee. Outside, the lighthouse blinked in a slow rhythm. Steady, unwavering. I envied it. As I stepped outside, the air felt cooler. A soft breeze came off the water, brushing against my face. I walked the length of the wooden boardwalk back toward my car, the planks creaking with each step. The USB felt heavier in my bag than its size should allow. Before starting the engine, I sat in silence, fingers curled around the steering wheel. My sister's smug face from earlier flashed in my mind, her perfect lipstick, the way she'd raised her glass so smugly. I didn't know what I would find on the drive. But whatever it was, it would be the first time I held a piece of truth that wasn't handed to me by someone else. I started the car, and the headlights cut through the mist, and for a moment I felt oddly calm. Then I saw it, a black sedan, parked across the street, silent. Its headlights turned on just as I pulled away. I didn't speed up, I didn't panic, I just drove, one hand on the wheel, and the other resting over my purse, where the truth waited, blinking like a lighthouse in the dark. By the time I reached home, the fog still curled around the street lamps like ghostly fingers. I parked in front of my townhouse and sat for a moment, the engine idling, my thoughts louder than the hum beneath the hood. The street was still, and even the rustling leaves seemed hesitant to move. Inside, the air carried a faint trace of jasmine from the candle I'd forgotten to blow out. I slipped off my shoes and dropped my purse on the counter, everything automatic, muscle memory doing what my brain couldn't. The silver USB was still in my hand. It felt like a stone. I moved to the small office tucked behind the kitchen, where binders lined the walls and a corkboard loomed half-filled with Post-its and scribbled notes. I hesitated before sitting down, fingers trembling as I plugged the drive into my laptop. The folder blinked to life on the screen. Wellington Holdings, Archive. I opened it. Rows of PDFs, contracts, and scanned ledgers filled the folder. One file name jumped out. Transfer Grand Isle PDF. I clicked it. My breath caught as the deed transfer opened. The Grand Isle property. The island that had caused more tension in our family than any inheritance ever should. And there, at the bottom of the page, was my signature. Except it wasn't. My name was scrawled in handwriting that looked eerily close to mine, but it was all wrong. The A had an extra curl. The ink pressure was inconsistent, like someone had traced over a printout. The date read April 9th, 2016. But I wasn't in Florida that day. I was in Arizona, giving a presentation to a nonprofit. I remembered the sunburn on my cheeks and the rental car that smelled like lemons. That night, Valora had called. Daddy just needs a few forms signed. Estate stuff for Grandma. I'll email them. You can sign digitally. I had trusted her. Back then, I still believed that betrayal wore fangs and shadows, not lip gloss and sisterly sweetness. I opened another file, a scanned email thread between my father and their longtime lawyer. Ensure the transfer appears voluntary. Use the compliance stamp template. Daughter's consent form attached, alias signature file applied. Alias signature. I nearly dropped the mouse. They hadn't just lied, they'd planned it. Systematically. I scrolled through the documents, finding names of witnesses. 2 old staff members from the estate. Both were long gone. One disappeared after being accused of theft. The other, fired and relocated. I sat back, stunned. The paper trail had been scrubbed so clean it sparkled. Until now. My eyes locked on another file. Delilah W. Estate.pdf. My grandmother's name. I opened it, heart pounding. The will appeared, notarized and dated. The language was clear, simple, unmistakable. The Grand Isle property shall belong to my granddaughter, Arlena Minid Doyle, for personal and charitable use. Not Harlan, not Valora, me. I felt the blood rush from my head. I remembered holding Grandma's hand in that hospital bed, days before she passed. Her words were so faint I had to lean close to hear. Promise me, Arlena, make something good out of all this. For you. I had nodded, tearful and naive, not knowing that the promise would be buried under forged signatures and legal manipulation. Rage and grief bloomed together, sharp and fast. I stood up suddenly, nearly knocking over my chair, and began pulling old sticky notes, markers, printouts. I needed to see it, not just on a screen, but mapped out, line by line, dates, names, document IDs, witnesses, all pinned to the corkboard. Red string stretched across the wall, connecting timelines and lies like scars. At some point, I called 2 contacts, a handwriting expert I'd once helped during a legal seminar, and a real estate lawyer I knew from my nonprofit days. Left voicemails for both. No details. Just my name, a calm voice, and a request for a callback. I returned to the screen. One final folder caught my attention. Personal correspondence. Inside, 3 scanned letters and an old email chain. The last message, dated 1 week before Grandma Delilah's stroke, was addressed to me. Subject: for when the time is right. I clicked. I want you to take the island, Arlena. You'll build something beautiful there, something that outlasts marble and money. Just promise me you'll keep it yours. Tears welled in my eyes. I couldn't breathe for a moment. She knew. Somewhere deep down, Grandma must have suspected what they'd do. This wasn't just sentiment. This was intent. A final safeguard. I printed it. The whir of the printer broke the stillness. When the paper landed in the tray, I grabbed it and held it like a lifeline. Then I went digging, searching county property records online, cross-referencing the deed upload date with the probate window. It matched. The fake transfer had been submitted just 4 days after her funeral, a narrow window during which no one would be watching. They didn't just cheat. They timed it to perfection. By the time the clock read 2:14 a.m., my office looked like a war room. But I wasn't done. I scrolled one more time through my phone contacts. My thumb hovered over a name I hadn't dared to touch in years. Cassian. He was the only one who had both the resources and the willingness to play dirty. If the cause was just, we hadn't spoken since the fallout. But this wasn't about the past. It was about reclaiming what never should have been taken. I took a deep breath, then typed a message. Need to meet. Urgent. Family matter. One you might still care about. No more silence. No more trust handed over like spare change. Tomorrow, the reckoning would begin. That night, I slipped into bed, but sleep never really came. I lay still, staring at the ceiling as the shadows shifted with the moonlight. The printed email from Grandma Delilah remained face up on my nightstand. The last words she left me, simple yet heavy. You'll build something beautiful. Keep it yours. How cruel it was. The way words that once gave me comfort now twisted into irony. I had built something. I had nurtured it, watched it grow. And now, it wasn't mine. Not legally, not on paper. The trust I placed in family had been used against me like a knife slid between the ribs. By dawn, I rose, dressed in muted tones. Soft gray slacks, a buttoned blouse that didn't invite attention. I skipped breakfast, slipped past the staff quarters, and avoided the front drive entirely. My car was parked out back near the old gardener's shed, intentionally forgotten and perfectly hidden. The estate gates opened with a quiet groan into a city still stretching awake, streets damp from overnight humidity, palm fronds rustling in hushed warning. I drove aimlessly at first, letting the rhythm of tires on asphalt ground me. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I was done with being stunned. My mind repeated the sequence over and over. The forged deed, the mismatched dates, the elegant trap I had fallen into. My family didn't just erase me from ownership, they had tried to erase my will to fight. I pulled into a cafe halfway between my estate and downtown, neutral ground. It was the kind of place that didn't ask questions, where people came for coffee and forgot faces quickly. The sun was climbing, bright and unrelenting, but I still felt a cold hollowness in my chest. I checked my phone again. Still no call from the legal office I had emailed late last night. Out of desperation or instinct, I dialed a number I hadn't touched in over 3 years. Hello? The voice was deeper now, but unmistakably his. Cassian, it's Arlena. I hesitated only a breath. We need to meet. Today. A pause, the kind of pause that held a dozen old conversations we never finished. Then, all right, we agreed on a quiet hotel lounge by the marina. Discreet, quiet, ideal for business no one wanted overheard. I arrived early and sat at a corner table, pretending to sip tea while observing the room. The lounge was stylish but forgettable. Dark wood accents, soft cream upholstery, and wide windows that spilled sunlight in lazy angles. Cassian entered without fanfare. He nodded once before sliding into the seat across from me. Time had carved more definition into his face, finer lines around the eyes, a touch of silver near his temples. But his gaze was the same, a mixture of guarded curiosity and something else, an echo of old loyalty. You got my message, he said simply. I did. I laid out the printed evidence in silence, a scan of the deed with the forged signature, a copy of Grandma's email, and the irregular correspondence trail. Cassian. They transferred ownership of the island without my consent. His brows furrowed as he read, fingers brushing the paper slowly, precisely. This is serious. Forging a deed. That's not a family squabble. That's criminal. I don't want to fight for headlines, I said firmly. I want it undone. Quietly, legally, strategically. He studied me for a long moment. Are you doing this for revenge? I met his gaze head-on. Not revenge. Dignity. Justice. My grandmother left that island in my name. They stole more than land. They stole what she believed I could become. A nod. A quiet understanding passed between us. Then he said, I'll help, but 2 conditions. I tensed. 1, no rash decisions. We do this quietly, step by step. 2, you run this like a CEO, not a wounded daughter. No emotion, just execution. My chest tightened. Not with fear, but with clarity. That's exactly what I need. For the next hour, we rebuilt the battlefield. Cassian introduced me to a contact, a legal strategist skilled in off-the-record acquisitions. We discussed forming a shell company to act as a silent buyer, Blue Reef Holdings. It was a name I chose quickly but purposefully. Grandma had called the view from the island her Blue Reef heaven. In the following days, I worked in silence. Blue Reef began acquiring slivers of land, a forgotten dock lease here, a vendor contract there, tiny pieces, insignificant on their own, but together they were pressure points. Some parcels were adjacent to the resort, others were utility junctions. I made sure every transaction was shielded behind layers of encrypted storage. My office, once filled with floral sketches and design boards, turned into a tactical war room. I pinned a map of the island to the far wall. Each parcel claimed was marked with a red X, strings connected names, transfer dates, silent partner firms. It looked chaotic to anyone else, but to me, it was order being reborn. Cassian checked in daily. We used encrypted messaging, no calls, no emails. Midweek, we met again. This time, he slid a slim document across the table. This, he said, is the title deed to the central power hub of the island. It's the nerve. Once Blue Reef claims this through a final shell, you'll hold leverage, real leverage. I stared at the deed. its clean lettering, its silent weight. It wasn't just about ownership anymore. It was about reclaiming a narrative. Mine. As I stepped out into the sun, a breeze off the marina stirred my hair. I glanced around. A man pretended to read a paper. A couple sipped wine by the window. No one was watching. And yet, I felt watched. Because taking back the island wasn't just reclaiming land. It was declaring power. Quietly. Precisely. Unshakably. And I had just begun. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The air was thick with the kind of silence that presses on your chest, the kind that feels like a warning before a storm. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stood by the window, staring at the faint pink light breaking over the horizon. The document Cassian had given me lay open on my desk, but my eyes kept drifting toward the old photo frame beside it, one of Grandma Delilah and me on the island's pier. Her hand rested on my shoulder, her smile full of quiet conviction. That image reminded me of what still needed to be done. By 8, I was on the road. The route to the nursing home ran along the coast, winding between patches of pine and salt marsh. I hadn't been there in nearly 10 years, not since my father's retirement party when I'd last seen Alara, his accountant, the only one who'd ever dared to question him in my presence. The building stood at the end of a long drive lined with oak trees. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean and calm, the kind of place chosen by people who wanted peace, not pity. I parked, straightened my blazer, and walked through the automatic glass doors. The receptionist looked up from her desk. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Alara Jensen. She's expecting me." She nodded and pointed down a hallway. "Room 212, right by the courtyard." I thanked her and made my way down the hall, the smell of antiseptic mixed with faint hints of lavender from the air fresheners. When I reached the room, I knocked gently. "Come in," a soft voice said. Alara sat by the window, a shawl draped over her shoulders, her silver hair neatly tied back. The same sharp eyes I remembered flicked up as she recognized me. "Well, if it isn't little Arlena Wellington," she said with a faint smile. "It's been a long time." I smiled back. "Too long. You look good, Alara." She chuckled, motioning to the chair across from her. "Good enough to remember things your family would rather I forgot." Her words landed heavier than I expected. We made small talk first, about the weather, the coffee, the noise of the nurses' shoes squeaking on tile floors. But it didn't take long before she leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I suppose Cassian told you to find me," she said. I blinked. "He mentioned you once, years ago, but he didn't send me here." A flicker of amusement passed through her eyes. "Then I guess the truth was ready to find you on its own." She turned toward a small side table where a teapot and 2 cups sat waiting. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured. "I kept a copy of the original will, Arlena. I knew they'd try something after your grandmother passed." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The only sound was the steady ticking of the clock on the wall. She reached into a drawer beside her chair and pulled out a sealed envelope, aged at the corners. The wax seal was faint, but still intact. My grandmother's insignia, the tiny engraving of a seashell surrounded by initials. "Your father made me sign a statement that I destroyed all copies," Alara said. "But I didn't. Something in me couldn't. Delilah trusted me with her finances for 30 years. I wasn't about to let her last wish vanish into a shredder." I took the envelope carefully, feeling its weight. "You have no idea what this means." "Oh, I do," she said, sitting back with a weary sigh. "But be careful, Arlena. You're walking into a nest of snakes, and they know how to bite without leaving marks." I broke the seal. Inside was the original will, yellowed slightly with age, but unmistakably authentic. And there, in her handwriting, were the words I'd already seen in the digital copy. "The Grand Isle property shall belong to my granddaughter, Arlena M. Doyle, to be held in her name for personal and charitable use." Valora's name wasn't mentioned anywhere. My throat tightened as I traced the signature line with my fingertip. It wasn't just legal proof, it was my grandmother's voice rising from the past, affirming what they had tried to bury. I looked up. "Alara, why now? Why give this to me after all these years?" She studied me quietly. Because your father's gone too far this time, and because your sister's planning something big. I heard it through one of the old staff, a media event on the island this weekend, a rebranding, they called it. I frowned. Rebranding? Alara nodded. She's calling it the Wellington Legacy Project, a charity facade for tax purposes, but everyone knows it's a PR stunt. Fashion bloggers, photographers, the whole show. She wants to make the island hers in the public eye before you can prove otherwise. I exhaled slowly, the coffee in my cup now cold and untouched. That's not going to happen. Just be smart, Alara warned. Pride runs deep in your family. They won't back down without a fight, and they won't fight fair. I placed the will back in its envelope and tucked it into my bag. Don't worry, Alara. I learned their kind of fight a long time ago. Before I left, she reached out and squeezed my hand. Your grandmother believed in you, Arlena. Don't let her faith go to waste. Outside, the sun had risen high. I stood by my car for a long time before getting in. My phone buzzed with a new notification. A news alert showing Valora smiling in a designer dress, posing beside the island's marina with the caption, "The Wellington Legacy, a family vision of renewal." I couldn't help but laugh. The timing was almost cinematic. That afternoon, I drove back to my townhouse and spread the will across my desk under the lamplight. The ink shimmered faintly, proof of something incorruptible. Cassian's words echoed in my mind. Not yet. Let them climb higher. So I waited and planned. I called a trusted notary, an old law school friend now working under strict confidentiality. I met him at his office after dusk, the envelope sealed once more. Keep this safe, I said. If anything happens to me, deliver it to Cassian Moore in San Francisco. He nodded, eyes narrowing in concern. Arlena, are you sure you want to walk this road? I'm already halfway down it, I said. When I got home, the air had cooled. The lights from the city shimmered across the bay like broken glass. I pinned a copy of the island's map onto my wall, another thread connecting the pieces of my growing plan. I picked up the phone and called Cassian. He answered on the first ring. I've got it, I said quietly. The original? Yes, and Valora's planning a media event. She's painting herself as the face of the family legacy. He sighed. Then we'll give her enough rope to hang herself. I smiled faintly. They think the war hasn't started yet. He paused. And they're wrong? Dead wrong. The Miami sun was relentless that morning, glittering, sharp, almost theatrical. It bounced off every glass wall, every sports car, and every sequin on Valora's gown as she stepped up to the podium like it was a runway. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. Every major outlet was live streaming it, and my phone wouldn't stop buzzing with headlines. Valora Wellington unveils Grand Isle's future. The Wellington Legacy reimagined. Sole heir to Grand Isle speaks out. I tapped on the feed. There she stood, Valora, flanked by palm trees and banners that read the Wellington Legacy Project. Cameras flashed as she smiled, her posture sculpted to perfection. Even her voice sounded like it had been edited in post. Thank you all for coming, she began, syrup smooth. Today marks a new era, for our family, for Grand Isle, and for the community. As the sole heir to our family's greatest treasure, I'm honored to lead Grand Isle into a future of sustainability, luxury, and innovation. I flinched at the phrase, sole heir. It shouldn't have stung, but it did. The audience clapped on cue. Valora let it stretch just long enough before lifting a perfectly manicured hand. Of course, she added, all sweetness. My sister Arlena has chosen a quieter path. She's always been the introspective one, happy to let others lead. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Reporters nodded knowingly, as if it were a charming family anecdote. I muted the sound and stared at her image on screen, the same face that had whispered lies behind my back at dinner, the same calm mask she wore when she said, "It's just paperwork," before locking me out of every family decision. Now she was spinning it all into some glittering tale for the cameras. I leaned back in my chair, jaw tight, content to let others lead. No, I'd been silenced, dismissed. Shut out every time I asked about fairness or truth. They called it drama. They called me sensitive. The live stream flickered. Valora's voice floated on, muted but sharp. Today, I also have more personal news to share. She turned slightly. That's when he entered. Darian Redwood, the real estate prince, the man known for flipping neighborhoods into luxury resorts. He slid beside her, his hand resting on her back like it belonged there. Cameras flashed again. "We're engaged," Valora beamed, raising her hand. A diamond like a glacier sparkled in the light. "And together, we'll take Grand Isle global, a fusion of love, legacy, and innovation." Off-screen, champagne popped. The crowd cheered. Valora smiled into the camera like a politician selling hope. Then she said it. Calm, reverent, rehearsed. "My grandmother always said the island would thrive in the right hands. I like to think she'd be proud of what I'm building." I nearly dropped my mug. Our grandmother, Delilah Wellington, would never have said that. Not to her. Not about this. The air around me thickened. I reached forward and shut the laptop. The screen went black, and in it, I saw only my own reflection. Silent, still, hollow-eyed. I stayed that way for minutes, maybe longer. My chest burned, but it wasn't just anger. It was something sharper, a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I got up, walked to the sink, and poured a glass of water just to feel something real. Cold condensation gathered on my skin. It steadied me. Across the room, the wall of evidence stared back. Printouts, notes, legal copies, taped photos, red string tracing every twist of Valora's deception. This wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. It was about truth. I returned to my desk, opened the draft email to Valora, the one I'd rewritten a dozen times. "You've gone too far this time." I highlighted the line. Then I hit delete. Cassian's voice echoed in my head, "Let them climb higher." So I let her. Instead, I opened the folder marked Restoration, my real weapon. Click. Confirm probate filings in D.C. Contact handwriting expert for affidavit. Review Blue Reef Holdings financial structure. Each keystroke was fuel. As the day slipped into twilight, golden light streamed through the blinds, striping my workspace in amber and shadow. I reached for the pendant beside my keyboard, the sea glass necklace Grandma gave me the summer I turned 16. She found it after a storm. "Things that survive the tide," she said, "are the ones meant to last." I clasped it around my neck. It lay cool against my skin, grounding me more than any word could. I printed out federal estate access forms, slipped notarized documents into a leather satchel, and carefully placed a faded photo of Grandma Delilah in the front pocket. This was more than a paper trail. It was my legacy, too. By nightfall, I was at the station. The train to D.C. waited, a long stretch of silver under humming lights. I boarded, found a seat by the window, and watched Miami fade into golden smears of light and shadow. The rhythm of the tracks reminded me of Grandma's heartbeat when I laid against her chest. I could almost hear her whisper again, "Truth always takes the slow train, Arlena, but it never derails." I closed my eyes and let the rhythm carry me. Back in Miami, Valora was likely still basking in applause, posting engagement photos, basking in her self-made myth. She wouldn't notice the tremor yet, not until it reached the foundation she thought was untouchable. And by the time her post hit 10,000 likes, I'd be stepping into the Capitol archives, with the truth she thought she'd buried forever. Washington, D.C., woke under a pale, silent sky, one of those mornings that feels suspended, like the whole city is waiting for something to break the stillness. I stepped out of my hotel room, my bag slung over my shoulder, heavier than usual with the documents I carried. My heart, though, was strangely light. Folded neatly in my inner jacket pocket was my grandmother's email, the last piece of her voice, now my shield. The archives building loomed ahead, a solemn temple of truth. Inside the marble lobby, I found Alara waiting, wrapped in a charcoal shawl, leaning against a column like she'd stood through centuries of storms. Her face was calm, no trace of the panic I'd once seen in Florida. Seeing her here meant more than I could say aloud. She had chosen truth over silence. We didn't waste time on greetings. She led me down the long, echoing corridors of bureaucracy. The floors were polished, the silence clinical. When we reached her office, a small wood-paneled room with ceilings far too grand for its size, she shut the door and walked to a locked drawer. She turned to me with measured words. "Your father is holding a press conference today in Miami," she said. "He'll be unveiling fabricated documents, declaring Valora as the sole heir." I didn't flinch. I expected this move. "Public image is quicker than the courts," I said. "He wants headlines to shape the truth before the law can correct it." Alara opened a second drawer and pulled out 2 folders. She slid one toward me. "These are the originals," she said. "Deeds, time-stamped transfers, property records, all bearing your name, all authenticated." I placed a trembling hand on the folder. The weight of it felt like everything my father had tried to erase, restored in ink and signatures. Then came the twist I hadn't expected. "I altered a few records in the past," Alara admitted, not looking away. "Your father pressured me. I can't undo what's been done, but I can help make sure the truth survives." Her eyes didn't beg for forgiveness. They burned with resolve. She wasn't here to apologize. She was here to stand beside justice. That was enough. A memory snapped into my mind. Dad standing in my college apartment years ago. I'd told him I wanted to study environmental law. He waved a hand dismissively. "You'll marry rich, Arlena. Don't waste time chasing paper degrees." That same arrogance was now behind velvet folders and press events. I stood, folder in hand. "It's time." She gave me a single nod, and I left without another word. Outside, the air was cold and clean. I walked down the steps of the archive building with my bag clutched to my side like a lifeline. The folder felt hot against my hip. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, I called Cassian. "Do you have it?" he asked. No pleasantries. "Yes," I replied. "I'll alert my legal team." What followed happened fast. An organized chaos of professionals moving in sync. Legal teams in D.C. began processing injunctions. Journalists in Miami received discreet tips. Press releases were drafted. Affidavits were signed and sealed. Everything surged into motion like an orchestra building to crescendo. Meanwhile, in Miami, the stage was already set. The press event was held at the family estate. Red velvet folders lay on polished oak desks. The family crest was embossed on gold-trimmed binders. My father stood at the podium, flanked by his lawyer and Valora, who wore a tailored ivory suit and a smug, expectant smile. The cameras clicked. The air was thick with curated anticipation. Dad spoke with authority. "By this documentation, I formally declare that Valora Wellington is the rightful heir to Grand Isle." Flashbulbs. Applause. Murmurs of agreement. I watched it live, seated alone in a small conference room, the screen glowing in front of me. My hands rested on the armrests, steady. I knew what was coming next. Then the real show began. A man in a neutral gray suit walked onto the stage, not part of the press. He stepped quietly to Dad's lawyer and handed him an envelope. Unassuming, sealed in red. The lawyer read. His expression twisted. He whispered something to my father. Dad's confident stance faltered. Behind him, Valora stiffened. The envelope held Alara's evidence, authenticated deeds, time-stamped property transfers, my name in official print. The media had been notified. A second press release was being distributed. On screen, the folder was laid flat across the podium. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters started shouting questions. "Is this the real deed? What about the timestamp? Why is there another heir?" Chaos surged like a wave swallowing the stage. Valora's composure cracked. Her smile melted into confusion. Dad's jaw tightened as the lawyer fumbled for words. It was no longer their narrative, it was the truth, and it had arrived on time. Back in D.C., I exhaled deeply. I felt it. Not just vindication, but something quieter, more profound. The restoration of what had been stolen. My phone buzzed. "Cassian." I answered. "It's done." "Yes," he replied softly. And they didn't see it coming. I stood slowly, walking to the window. The sun had risen higher now, casting the city in gold. Below, life moved on. Somewhere in Miami, Valora would be scrambling, their press advantage turned into a PR disaster. But the foundation of their lies was broken. I turned back to the room, shoulders squared. My grandmother's voice, Cassian's quiet strength, Elara's late but powerful courage, they had brought us here. And I wasn't done. The night air on Grand Isle buzzed with a charged energy, like the calm before a storm no one knew was coming. I watched from miles away, the glow of my laptop screen the only light in my quiet room. On that screen, Valora's engagement party played out like a meticulously staged dream. Yachts lined the docks, string lights wrapped around palm trees, and music floated through the ocean breeze like a lullaby meant to distract. Guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos sipped champagne by the tower, their laughter echoing off the stone terraces. Flashbulbs from fashion bloggers popped under the moonlight. From the outside, it looked like the height of privilege, but I knew the truth. Everything they were celebrating was built on stolen ground. Mine. Earlier that morning, a court officer had delivered an injunction to the Grand Isle Estate Office. Legal proceedings had begun. But Valora and her circle thought it was a formality. They believed in their insulation, in the armor of the Wellington name. They didn't see how brittle their world had become. I sat still, heart pounding, every nerve attuned to the moment. This night, this party, was the final domino. The scene shifted. My screen now showed the terrace where the main ceremony was unfolding. A soft string quartet played in the distance. Valora emerged, radiant in a custom white gown laced with crystal embroidery. Her hair coiled like royalty, her heels clicking against polished stone. Darian, her fiancé, flanked her side, calm and perfectly rehearsed. She stepped to the microphone. "To Grand Isle," she began, lifting her glass, "the jewel of the Wellington name." Cheers rose, the music crescendoed, but then, a stutter in the sound. One of the violinists paused, startled. Then, the quartet fell silent. Out of the crowd, from the back, a court officer in formal uniform stepped forward. He moved calmly, but with intent. The conversations hushed. He raised a brown envelope, then spoke in a clear, unwavering tone. "By order of the court," he announced, "all properties and financial assets tied to Grand Isle are hereby frozen, effective immediately, pending litigation." Gasps rippled through the crowd. One guest dropped her flute of champagne. A murmur spread, rapid and uncontrollable. Valora's expression cracked, a flicker of panic just beneath her practiced smile. "What is this?" she asked, her voice tight. Before she could react further, a second officer stepped beside the first. "Additionally," he declared, lifting a second envelope, "by judicial ruling, the sole legal owner of Grand Isle is Arlena M. Doyle. All previous transfers are null. These documents bear the full court approval." Silence. Then camera shutters snapped furiously. Reporters pushed forward. Valora's mouth parted, but no words came, and then I appeared. Not in person, not yet. First, my image lit up the screen behind the stage. I stood in a white suit, backlit and composed, my figure projected 10 feet tall for all to see. A whisper ran through the guests as they turned. Then I stepped out. Yes, I had flown in, quietly and deliberately. Now I walked across the terrace toward the stage, each step unhurried. No fear, only clarity. Valora staggered back. "You! This is some kind of setup!" I took the mic, meeting her eyes. "You always mistook silence for weakness," I said, my voice ringing out. "But silence can be strategy, and justice can be patient." The crowd watched, breath held. I turned slightly toward the guests. She and her father forged papers, stole titles, built an empire out of lies, and yet they still toasted themselves as if it were all earned. I raised a champagne glass, the bubbles catching the terrace lights. "So tonight, I offer a new toast, not to greed, not to illusion, but to restoration." I tilted the glass slowly, letting the champagne fall, spilling off the edge of the stage in a sparkling arc into the sea below. "To cleansing the rot," I said softly. Valora shrieked, grabbing the mic. "You can't do this! This is fraud! You'll pay for this!" But behind me, projected on the screen, were the court documents, seals, signatures, the legal stamp of Alara County. There was no denying it. The crowd turned. Darian looked at Valora, and then at the screen. The truth was unavoidable. He took a step back, then another. Without a word, he turned and walked away, his silence louder than any argument. My gaze found my father in the crowd, standing just behind the chaos. His face was pale, almost ghostly. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. "You taught me to play dirty," I said quietly, "but I learned to win clean." And then I turned. I walked off the stage, my back to the applause, the confusion, the storm I had triggered. I didn't need to see their faces anymore. I had already seen enough. The rain had softened by the time dawn broke over Grand Isle. The sky, still bruised and swollen from the night's storm, stretched over the shoreline like a held breath. I rose early, earlier than I had in weeks, and stepped outside, barefoot, the damp wooden floor of the villa cool beneath me. I pulled on a thin sweater and walked toward the beach, letting the salt-heavy breeze tug at the hem. The sand welcomed me with its chill. Each wave kissed the shore with a quiet sigh, and I imagined it whispering truths long buried. My phone screen lit up with headlines as I scrolled absently. Wellington heir reclaims island. Arlena Doyle confirmed as legal owner. Valora's legacy cracks under truth. Two women, once cast in the same family photo. One now in the spotlight, one holding the truth, but only one smiling. And it wasn't Valora. I kept walking, waves curling around my ankles like soft chains loosening. The burden I'd carried, of being the forgotten one, the discarded one, began to slip away with each step. Grand Isle had always held ghosts, but today it felt cleansed, not empty, but still, a hush after a reckoning. Up ahead, near the pier, Maeve stood waiting in her navy blazer and white trousers, clipboard in hand. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. A simple nod passed between us. The press conference was in under an hour, and already local crews were setting up, huddling beneath umbrellas, adjusting sound gear. I turned inland, my path winding through damp sand and dewy grass. Rows of folding chairs had been set up facing the pavilion, all slick with morning mist. The stage had been arranged beneath a banner of marine flags. At the center, the island's crest, draped in deep blue cloth, stood the podium, solitary, waiting. The wind began to stir, tugging at the flags and my sleeves. I stood for a moment, letting it pass through me. In that stillness, I whispered to myself, not a vow, but a reminder. Revenge is tempting, but healing is power. Then I stepped forward. The pavilion filled quickly. Reporters, local officials, university reps, even a few retired fishermen from the southern dock who had watched the Wellington family take over this island decades ago. All of them stood beneath shared umbrellas or ponchos, waiting. I took the microphone. My voice shook at first but found steadiness as I spoke. "Good morning," I said, scanning the crowd. "Thank you all for coming, despite the rain. Yesterday, the truth returned to this island. Today, I want to show you what that truth will become." A gentle hush spread. I nodded toward Maeve, who tapped a small projector behind me. On the screen lit the original, unedited will, signed, time-stamped, witnessed. "I am not building a private resort here," I continued, "and I won't sell this land to the highest bidder. This island will not be walled off for yachts and cocktail parties. Starting today, it will serve as a non-profit marine education center." Gasps and scattered murmurs broke out. "This will be a place for underserved students, young scientists, local fishermen, anyone who wants to learn about marine life, preservation, and the beauty of our oceans. It will be a sanctuary, not for profit, for purpose." I let the silence return. "This is not an act of revenge," I said slowly. "This is reclamation. This is what justice looks like, not in courtrooms, but in choices." Questions followed, sharp and fast, about logistics, funding, security. I answered each, brief but firm. Maeve stepped up occasionally to clarify details. Already, the questions were shifting from curiosity to admiration, and with each one, I felt the tide turning, not just against Valora, but towards something better. I imagined Valora then, pacing her Miami condo, her phone buzzing with unanswered calls, her publicist red-eyed from damage control. I imagined the ring, the symbol of everything she once used to define herself, left abandoned on a glass counter, and the empire she thought she inherited now splintering under the weight of real truth. My phone vibrated. Dad's number flashed on screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Arlena," he said, voice hoarse. "You've made your point." I looked toward the horizon, where the first boat of students was expected to arrive. "I'm not angry," I said softly. "Just done." He was silent. I didn't wait for more. I ended the call. Later that afternoon, I found Maeve in her modest beach office, a converted boathouse with cracked windows and a coffee maker older than both of us. She was watching a group of teenagers arrive, backpacks slung and eyes wide with awe. "You're staying," I said. "Full time." "Lead coordinator, if you want it." She turned to me, lips trembling. "You mean it?" "I do." Her smile said everything. We didn't need more words. By sunset, the island had shifted. I stood on the upper balcony, the same one Valora once used for photo ops, her hair styled just so, champagne in hand. But tonight, there were no cameras, only the sound of laughter as children unloaded gear and science kits from the boat. No designer heels, just muddy sneakers and hopeful eyes. This was what Grand Isle was meant for. Not gated glamour, but open learning. Not luxury, but legacy. I closed my eyes. Let the wind lift my hair, the scent of salt and hope clinging to my skin. In my mind, I heard their words again. The ones that haunted me growing up. "You don't belong. You're just the girl in the laundry room, the invisible one." But the laundry room is where water flows, where things are cleaned, where things begin again. Turns out, roots grow in the dark. And roots grow trees. And trees survive storms. I opened my eyes. Just then, the clouds parted slightly, and a lone shaft of golden sunlight pierced through, striking the water with brilliance. This was no ending. This was the beginning of everything. Sometimes the people meant to protect you are the ones who silence you the most. This story wasn't just about land or money. It was about reclaiming worth in a family that decided who mattered and who didn't. Have you ever been underestimated by the people closest to you? What would you do if you were handed the basement while someone else got the view? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your family story. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories just like this one.